We recently went on a 3.5-week road trip around both islands of New Zealand. It was my 4th time in the country, but it was my wife Jamie's first time there, so I prioritised the itinerary on someone's first time visiting New Zealand. And so what I'm going to do in this video is take you through our 3.5-week itinerary, going through all the accommodation, all the activities we did, and then after that I'm going to give you some options of how you can extend the trip on the North and the South Island, and then finally I'm going to give you some options for a 2-week itinerary in New Zealand. Now I know just spending 2 weeks in New Zealand can sound a bit like sacrilege, but the truth of the matter is, a lot of people can only take 2 weeks off at a time from their work, or only even get 2 weeks per year, if that. So, whilst the purist of me would be like, no, you can't spend 2 weeks there, you gotta spend longer, I'm gonna give you a couple of suggestions of how you could spend 2 weeks trying to see some of the best highlights in New Zealand. So first of all, this is our 3.5-week or 23-day itinerary that we did on our trip. Now I explained in the intro to the main documentary that we were going to be there over Christmas, which meant that on the North Island, the route we did was a little bit inefficient, kind of going back on ourselves a few times. And that was just because of where we're going to spend Christmas Day and the availability of the Hobbiton tour at that very busy time of year. So what I'm going to do is change that itinerary around slightly to a more efficient way of exploring the North Island. Plus I'm going to include the dolphin swimming in Kaikoura that we wanted to do but was sold out. And we did like a semi-backpacking trip, so like sometimes we were staying in hostels, other times we were staying in some lovely Airbnbs, as well as a couple of hotels. So a nice little variety of accommodation to give you some ideas for your trip. So to start off the trip, we had one night in Auckland, and we had flown in overnight from Vancouver, and so we basically spent the morning just catching up on some sleep, and then in the afternoon went for some drinks with our friends Dane and Stacey in town. We stayed at Naomi Hotel, which is actually by the airport, just because we're going to be picking up our car rental and then heading straight out the next day, and we didn't want to be staying right in downtown because it would just add a lot of extra time to our driving journey. By the way, if you want to book any of these hotels or activities, you can scan the QR code right here. Plus there's links in the description, and it doesn't cost you a penny extra, but means I get a little bit of commission, and since I'm trying to do this full time now, please book the hotel. Anyway, in Auckland, if you have a bit more time there, I suggest checking out Waiheke Island. That's something that Matt and I did back in 2017. You can get a ferry to the island and then explore around, going to lots of different wineries. For day 2, you want to head to the WAITOMO caves and do the blackwater rafting we did there with all the glowworms around. That's such an incredible and unique experience that you can't miss it from your itinerary. So you'll do that in the morning into early afternoon, and then this is where I'm switching up the order from what we did. You're now going to drive to near MATAMATA, which is where the Hobbiton tour is. And the day before we went to Hobbiton, we stayed in this beautiful Airbnb that was called Teal Corner Cabin. It was an absolutely gorgeous cottage on a farm, just 20 minutes drive from the Hobbiton set. We basically have our own private Airbnb in the Shire. Then in the morning, so for day 3, we went and did the Hobbiton movie set tour. You can just book the regular tour there, but we decided to go for the second breakfast tour, which also includes a lovely banquet breakfast in the mill room. After the Hobbiton tour, you can head to TAURANGA, where we actually spent Christmas and stayed at our friend Matt's mum's house. And we spent most of our time just hanging out at Mount Maunganui. And I just had a quick look, and there's a hostel there called Pacific Coast Backpackers Lodge that does do private rooms and dorm rooms, so that could be worth checking out if you're going to go stay there. From here, you're next going to be heading up to the Coromandel to go kayaking at Cathedral Cove. The company we did the kayaking with was just called Cathedral Cove Kayak Tours, and they did a fantastic job. Like, the guide we had was like one of the best on the trip. A nice balance of like information and banter, and the kayaking was done at a good pace. It was a really brilliant way to experience that fantastic location. And after the kayaking, you could spend the night up near Cathedral Cove, but where we stayed for hours on the night before was a bit further south in Waiheke Beach. And we had a lovely Airbnb there called The Boathouse.
It's beautiful. Oh, hi.
But before we go any further, I want to talk to you about this week's sponsor, because obviously we're doing a road trip, and for that you're going to need a car. So we booked our car rental using discovercars.com. And with Discover Cars, you can compare car rental deals from a wide range of suppliers when booking with them. So if I just search here for a car from Auckland to Wellington, you can see all the different offers from the different suppliers. If I click through on one, you can see everything that's included in the price. They do offer full coverage insurance as well, which if you don't want, you can opt out of with a click of a button, and then you've got your total cost down at the bottom of the page here. I had someone ask if you can take a car rental from the North Island to the South Island, and the answer is yes, that's exactly what we did. But the only thing to note is you'll incur a very high return fee, which Discover Cars highlights here. but I'll talk about some alternate money saving options you can do for this in next week's budget video. A couple of last things to note is Discover Cars has a 4.6 rating on Trustpilot with over 200,000 reviews. And if you use this link right here, which is also in the description, you'll get a discount off your first booking. So yeah, I've been using this website for quite a few of my recent trips and it's always been fantastic, so make sure you check them out.
Discover Cars.
Discover Cars.
Discover your car.
Anyway, back to the itinerary. So on our trip, we only spent like a half day in Rotorua before moving on, just because it was coming up to Christmas, but for this version of the itinerary, I've actually given you a night to stay there because there's so many different activities on offer. We did the Kaituna whitewater rafting, where you're going down the highest commercially rafted waterfall in the world. And then after that, on your way to Taupo, the beautiful serene waterfall we went to was called Kerosene Creek. And this river comes from like a thermal spring, so like the water's the temperature of a hot tub, and it was just paradise.
It's beautiful.
And then from here, you're going to be spending 3 nights in Taupo. We stayed at the Haka House hostel there, and on our first full day, we went and did the Tongariro crossing. Now for the Tongariro crossing, there are shuttles that'll take you to the start from Taupo if you like, because it's about an hour's drive from Taupo itself. Or you can drive to one end of the trek and then get a shuttle to the beginning, or vice versa. There's also shuttles that take you from the beginning car park to the end car park, or vice versa, depending on where you park your car. But my advice for the Tongariro crossing actually is, because like the first half of the trek is amazing. You're going through all the volcanic, like Mordor-like landscape. You're going past Mount Narahoi, you're seeing the Red Crater, and you can go down to the Emerald Pools. And so you've seen all the main sites, but you're only halfway through the trek, and then the rest of the trek is this very long slog just weaving down forever to get to the end car park. So if I was ever to do the Tongariro crossing again, I would just park at the start, do the first half of the hike, seeing all like the cool main stuff you come to see. From the Red Crater, go down to the first Emerald Pools, and then just turn around and go back from there and go back to your car. That saves you having to pay for a shuttle to get from one car park to the other. Plus you're spending all of your time in the best bit of the landscape rather than this sort of endless, monotonous trek that is the second half of the Tongariro crossing. Then on the final day in Taupo, we did the kayaking to the Mori carvings. This is like a half-day activity because it takes about an hour to kayak there, and then you kind of hang around the carvings for a bit, and then you kayak all the way back. Just beautiful, beautiful. And then to finish off the time in the North Island, we went down to Wellington for 2 nights. Once again, staying at Haka House. We had a double room in the hostel, which was in a prime location downtown, near all the bars and cafes and restaurants. And then during our time there, we did some Lord of the Rings stuff. We went to do the Waiheke Cave and did the behind-the-scenes tour there, which was really good fun. We went up to Mount Victoria, where you get amazing views all around of the city. Plus, there's a couple of Lord of the Rings locations there as well. And a really great place we went for lunch, which I didn't include in the main documentary, was a cafe called Maranui Cafe, which is in Lyle Bay near the airport. Food there was fantastic. Beautiful views of the bay, and it was rammed as well, but hopefully you'll get a spot when you go there. Right then, onto the South Island. For our trip, we had a night in Picton, and the reason being was that we'd already booked 2 nights in Blenheim for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and so we'd originally planned for that day to go down to Kaikoura and do the dolphin swimming, but the dolphin swimming had sold out months in advance, so we kind of had this free day left over. So we thought, you know what, the North Island's been very full on, very fast paced, let's just get to Picton and just chill out for a half day. But for this itinerary, hopefully you'll heed my advice and book your dolphin swimming way in advance, so you can get the ferry across, do your 2 nights in Blenheim, go and enjoy all the wineries, and then go down to Kaikoura and swim the dolphins. But just for reference, in Picton we were staying at a hotel called the Beachcomber Inn, which was right in the centre of town and a really lovely place. But in Blenheim, we're staying in another gorgeous Airbnb called the Packing Shed, and this place was about 15 minutes drive out of Blenheim, but is right amongst all the wineries. Like, one of the ones we visited, the Hans Herzog estate, was literally on the opposite side of the road of our Airbnb, so wasn't much of a hike to get there. And for getting around the wineries, we just hired out some bikes, and you'll easily find some bicycle rental places all around, but we just went with one called Book a Bike, simply because it was 5 minutes walk from our Airbnb, and it was just this lovely little family owned place, and we're like, oh yeah, there's 2 bikes, there you go, $45, see you later. Now, moving down the coast is a couple hours drive to Kaikoura. The dolphin swimming company we would have used if it hadn't sold out was Encounter Kaikoura. From there, it's another 2-hour drive down to Christchurch. You can have a half day there just exploring that lovely city. And in Christchurch we stayed at a hotel called The Fable. There was actually a really nice, really lovely hotel bang in the centre, and it was just a little bit cheaper than some of the big brand name hotels nearby, but it had the exact same quality and service. And then the next day is a big drive to Franz Josef across the Arthur's Pass. And when we drove the Arthur's Pass, the weather was really bad, so we didn't really get to get out and do any trails and stuff like that. But you can really make that a full kind of adventure day out, doing lots of little stops at viewpoints, waterfalls and things. So if you are driving that and the weather looks good, do a little research the night before on things to do on Arthur's Pass, and you should find some really cool things to check out. In Franz Josef, once again we stayed at Haka House Hostel, and we'd booked our heli hike with Franz Josef Glacier Guides, but unfortunately for us it was cancelled, which was really gutting for Jamie because she didn't get to experience it. But I'd done it a couple of times in the past and it's an absolute highlight of New Zealand, so make sure you include it in your South Island itinerary. Then from here we had 3 nights in Wanaka, staying at the Haka House Hostel yet again. We just did a shorter hike to the Rocky Mountain summit, but if you want to do the famous Roy's Peak hike, first of all note that it's going to get very busy. You want to get there early because that little car park will fill up. Secondly, where everyone queues up for the Instagram photo isn't actually the top, that's not even Roy's Peak. So if you don't want to queue for half an hour to get the exact same photo that everyone else has, just walk up to the top of the peak and there's hardly anyone there and you'll get an even better picture. The happy hour boat cruise we had out on Lake Wanaka is simply called Lake Wanaka Happy Hour Boat Cruise. And then for our final day in Wanaka, we did the scenic flight and cruise to Milford Sound. You can do a scenic flight from Queenstown to Milford Sound, but it's a lot shorter. The flight's only 25 minutes, whilst from Wanaka it's like a 45-minute flight, and it's just like unbelievable. Like you're literally flying through Middle Earth. Like I can't recommend it enough. That was unbelievable. I was just biggest grin on my face the whole time. If you want to experience Milford Sound but do it a cheaper way, you can do it as a day trip from Queenstown. It's a 4-hour drive each way, so it's going to be 8 hours of driving. So it's a very long day to go do a 90-minute cruise in Milford Sound. But one, the drive is one of the most spectacular roads in the world, and two, Milford Sound itself is just unbelievably stunning. So it's definitely worth doing. If you can't be bothered to drive all that in one day, you can easily book a day trip from Queenstown and a coach will take you there and back.
It's stunning. It's so beautiful. And we saw dolphins, which is really special.
After this, we went and did the Doubtful Sound overnight cruise. Now, I did a Doubtful Sound day trip on my previous time in New Zealand in 2017, and whilst that was good, the overnight one was just so much better because the two best things we did on the overnight trip was the kayaking, and also on the morning we went to a different part of the Sound called the Hall Arm. Whilst if you only do the day trip, you don't get to do either of those. And it takes about 2 hours to get to the actual Sound itself from where you park up in Manapori, because you have to take a 1-hour boat, then a 1-hour bus, do a few hours around the Sound, and then get the bus and the boat back. So the effort versus reward ratio is a bit off if you just do the day trip, whilst the overnight thing was just unbelievable. It is expensive. It was the most expensive activity we did on the trip. It was like over 1,000 New Zealand dollars, but if you can afford it and you have the time, definitely go for the overnight one rather than a day trip. And then finally, we finished up the trip with 4 nights in Queenstown. And Queenstown is just like, it's one of my favourite places in the world because there's just so much variety on offer in such a spectacular setting. So if you want to go full on adrenaline junkie, there's all the bungee jumps, the skydives, and all these other activities you never even heard of. If you want to relax, there's some amazing fine dining there and tons of lovely wineries around. If you're a younger backpacker and you want to party hard, this is the town to do it. And if you want to escape the crowds, it's very easy to go on some amazing hikes in the area. It's just an incredible town. We were staying at the Haka House Hostel once more, and the activities we did were the shot over river whitewater rafting. And the great thing about that is where you park to do the rafting, once you finish, you're only 3 minutes drive from the onsen hot pools. And we just booked the hour-long experience in the classic onsen. And then in the afternoon, we also booked a ticket to go on the Ernslaw steamboat, which I'd never done before in Queenstown, and I wouldn't say it's a must-do, but it's a nice way. We're having quite a busy time. It's a nice way just to slow down for a couple hours and have a little glass of wine and watch the scenery go by. The place we went to all of the Lord of the Rings locations was Deer Park Heights. Now you need to book this in advance because they only sell a certain amount of spaces per day, so there's not too many cars up there. So you register your vehicle online and pay the $75 the day before, and when you get to the gate it recognises your number plate and you get let in. And that was actually a really fun morning, like even for Matt and Jamie, who weren't so geeking out about the Lord of the Rings stuff as I was, they still enjoyed it because there's like so many spectacular views of the whole area, and plenty of animals around as well.
There you go.
The wine tour we did was with Alpine Wine Tours. We went to 3 different wineries in a space of a few hours, and it was such a brilliant trip, had an amazing time. We booked the tour that came with the dog, and then the dog wasn't actually on the tour, because if you read the small print, the dog's there sometimes, so just that's something to be aware of if the dog's a big draw for you. But despite that, it was still a fantastic tour. The guide running it was such a lovely bloke, and we had a really fantastic time. Yay! And then finally, the helicopter trip we did up to the Remarkables was with Glacier Southern Lakes Helicopters, and we did the Remarkables special, which was just like a 25-minute trip. It was like 5 minutes up in a helicopter, 10 minutes up there enjoying the view and having a glass of Prosecco, and then it was like another 10-minute journey back down in the helicopter because it went like a longer route on the way down. But it was a lovely way to finish off the trip, and if you can include it in your budget, I'd highly recommend it. So that was our 3.5-week itinerary driving around both islands of New Zealand. Now, if we were to extend our time there, one of the main things we missed out on the North Island was heading up to the Northland and to the Bay of Islands. Every time I film a trip in New Zealand and I don't go there, I always get comments like, how could you possibly miss this out? But the truth of the matter is, I actually went there in 2006. It was amazing. I loved it. Just haven't been back since. But if you want to add it in, you could probably whiz around the Bay of Islands in a couple of days, but I'd recommend somewhere between 3 and 5 to properly check it out. Then for the South Island, I talked in the outro of that episode about how we originally planned to do the Great Walks of the Routeburn track and the Milford track. Those two together would have taken us a week, and it's something I've been wanting to do for years. We just decided for this trip to save it for our next visit to New Zealand. But if you're not interested in doing those treks but want to expand your time on the South Island slightly more, the route that I did in 2017 included a few more of the highlights around the island. So some of the other main places worth checking out are going to the town of Nelson and seeing the Abel Tasman National Park. You want to give yourself a couple of days to check that out. And if you want to sort of complete your loop around the South Island, then after your time in Queenstown, you can go and check out Mount Cook, spend a night or two there. And then one of my favourite spots on the way back to Christchurch is a little place called Mount Sunday, which is where they shot Edoras in Lord of the Rings. Now obviously there's loads more to see in New Zealand than what I've mentioned in this video so far. Again, I've prioritised these itineraries and these tips on it being your first time visiting New Zealand. So whilst there is tons more to see than what I've mentioned, what if you want to get this itinerary and just try and squeeze it into 2 weeks? So I'm going to give you 3 different options about how you can try and see as many of New Zealand's highlights within a space of 2 weeks. Okay, so the first one, you're going to fly to Auckland, you're going to have a night there. Then the next day you're going to drive to Cathedral Cove and do the kayaking in the afternoon and stay somewhere up there. Day 3, drive down to Rotorua and do the whitewater rafting in the afternoon or another activity that takes your fancy. Day 4, drive to Hobbiton, do the movie set tour and then drive to Taupo. Day 5, go do the Tongariro crossing. Day 6, drive to Waitomo, do the blackwater rafting in the Glowworm Caves and then drive back to Auckland. And yes, this is very full on, but if you only got 2 weeks, this is the way you got to do it. Day 7, you're going to fly down to Christchurch and then have the afternoon just exploring that city. Day 8, drive across Arthur's Pass and get yourself to Franz Josef. Day 9, do the Glacier Heli hike at Franz Josef and then drive to Wanaka. Day 10 in Wanaka, go do Roy's Peak or another hike or whatever takes your fancy. Day 11, do the scenic flight and cruise to Milford Sound. If you don't want to pay for the scenic flight, then switch that night to a night in Queenstown and do a day trip to Milford Sound, or possibly even go and stay in Tiano, which is halfway between Queenstown and Milford Sound, to kind of break up the drive. And then the last 3 days will be in Queenstown, just doing whatever activities take your fancy. I've just based it on the ones that we did. And then fly home from Queenstown. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is similar to that, but at a slightly more leisurely pace and taking out some of the travelling. So as before, we're going to start in Auckland. Day 2, go to Cathedral Cove and do the kayaking. Day 3, head to Rotorua. And then on day 4, go to Kerosene Creek near Rotorua, and then go check yourself into the Airbnb that we did, the beautiful cottage on the farm that's just south of MATAMata and near the Hobbiton set. Day 5, do Hobbiton and then drive to Taupo. Day 6, Tongariro crossing. Day 7, Waitomo Caves and get yourself back to Auckland. And then for day 8, rather than going to Christchurch, you're just going to fly straight down to Queenstown and base yourself out from there. So maybe a couple of nights at Queenstown to get yourself settled in, and then drive to Wanaka for a couple of nights, doing some activities there, including the scenic flight to Milford Sound. For day 12 will be your overnight on the Doubtful Sound cruise. and then day 13 will be finishing up the cruise, heading to Queenstown, and then having your last day in Queenstown. So slightly different, still pretty full on, but not quite as much driving as in the previous version. And then the final version is skipping out the North Island altogether and just having 2 weeks on the South Island. And don't get me wrong, the North Island is amazing, it's just that the South is just freaking incredible. So for this trip, you're going to be flying in and out of Christchurch and driving around a loop of the South Island. So after your first night in Christchurch, we're going to head to Kaikoura and do the dolphin swimming. Next, you're going to head to Blenheim and go check out the wineries. Day 4, you're going to drive past Nelson and go and see the Abel Tasman National Park. There's a little town called Kaiteri, and from there you can book like a half-day tour of Abel Tasman, and then drive back to Nelson to spend the night there. Day 5 is a long-ass drive down to Franz Josef, and then day 6 we're doing the glacier heli hike there, and then driving to Wanaka. And then from there on out it's pretty similar, like 3 nights in Wanaka, including the scenic flight to Milford Sound, then doing the Doubtful Sound overnight cruise, then having some time in Queenstown, and then to get back to Christchurch, having a night in Mount Cook, and then on the final day on the drive back, go and see Mount Sunday, which is Edoras. So there you go. As with any country, there's a million other things to do than what I've suggested. These are just some of the main highlights for your first trip, but if you think there's any blatant obvious ones that I've missed out and you're screaming at the TV going, how the hell can you not mention this, Karl? Then hey, leave that in the comments, let other people know what they could go and see on their first trip in New Zealand. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, guys. Next week I'm going to be doing a budget breakdown of our trip, and I'll also tweak that budget for the 2-week versions that I've suggested here. So make sure you've subscribed and hit on the notifications so you don't miss that. If you haven't checked out the full New Zealand documentary series yet of our 3.5 weeks driving around, then please go check those out. I'm super proud of how those films came together. It's a lot of fun, so please go and enjoy them and let me know what you think about it in the comments. If you're wondering what the next big documentary series is going to be on my channel, it's going to be the Sri Lanka trip that I did in February. Whether I'll get that edited in time before I go off my next trip, I'm not sure yet, but in the meantime, I've got lots of other short videos planned to fill the gaps. So stay tuned, guys, and I'll see you very soon.